Friends, wherever you are tonight, find your comfortable space. Maybe dim that bright lamp beside you. We are stepping into shadows now. If this kind of journey matters to you, tap like so others might find it. If you want more walks through history, subscribe only if it feels true. Whisper where you are listening. Coast, country, city, night or dawn. Your presence makes the past breathe. Now settle your shoulders. Let your breath slow. We are starting the video. Listen. That sound isn't prayer. It's the bell that calls her to the slaughter. Feel the rip of her knuckles splitting open on wet canvas. Taste the iron tang of noble blood she scrubs from the sheets. See the shadow fall over her raw hands, not God's mercy, the steward's boots, polished like a coffin. He doesn't speak, just points up the tower stairs. Her throat seals shut. She knows. Every scullery maid knows. The king's rose chamber isn't for roses. It's where servant girls learn how kings pluck petals, one by one. She rises, legs buckling like a gutted deer. The steward's whisper follows her up the steps. Smile when he takes you. Cry and your father's barley field burns at dawn. The stone walls press closer. Torchlight flickers on wet mortar like weeping eyes. The door at the top isn't wood. It's a mouth. It opens silently, oiled hinges betraying no protest. Beyond isn't just a room, it's a well-rehearsed stage. The air hangs thick, cloying rose perfume laid over the sour tang of cold ashes and something else. The metallic ghost of fear passed. Velvet drapes, deep as bruises, frame a window overlooking the indifferent stars. Unnaturally large roses, petals like waxen skin, droop in ornate vases. The fire in the hearth crackles with false cheer. He isn't by the fire. He's at a table, his back mostly to her, pouring dark wine into a crystal goblet. The discarded crown gleams dully beside a ledger. He doesn't turn. He doesn't need to. Her arrival is a scheduled inconvenience, noted and filed. Like Ilara last week, the thought slices through her panic. Like Brenna before the snows. Girls who scrubbed the same floors, wept the same silent tears into the same bloody sheets, and vanished into whispers after their night in the rose chamber. The silence isn't empty. It thrums with the drip of wine filling the goblet, a sound as deliberate as a heartbeat. The ledger lies open, pages dense with neat black script. From her place by the door, she can't read the words, but she sees the pattern. Names, dates, perhaps sums. Inventory. Ilara, Brenna. Her own name waiting for its entry. A coldness deeper than the stone floor seeps into her bones. He lifts the goblet, the crystal catching the firelight in a brief, cruel sparkle. Still, he doesn't face her. His profile is sharp against the velvet gloom, a hawk's beak nose, the tight line of a mouth that knows only command, not conversation. He takes a slow sip. The wine stains his lips the color of the drapes. Her breath hitches, too loud in the suffocating quiet. Smile. The steward's command is a brand in her mind. She tries. Her cheeks feel like cracked plaster, her lips stiff and alien. It must look like a rictus, a death mask grin. A single drop of moisture, sweat, or the ghost of a tear she dared not shed, traces a cold path down her temple. He sets the goblet down with a soft clink that echoes like a gavel. Finally, he moves. Not towards her, but along the table, his fingers trailing over the open ledger. They pause, almost idly, near the bottom of the page, where the next entry would begin. His nail, clean and smooth, taps once. Tap. Her heart stops, then hammers against her ribs like a trapped bird. That's my place. He turns. Not fully, just enough to cast his gaze over his shoulder. It's not a look of appraisal, nor lust. It's the look a man gives a tool he's about to use, assessing its readiness, its functionality. His eyes, dark pits in the fire-flickered gloom, sweep over her, the coarse smock clinging to her thin frame, the raw redness of her knuckles stark against the gray fabric, the way her shoulders tremble, despite her desperate effort to hold them still. There is no warmth, no flicker of recognition of her humanity. Only a detached, weary inevitability. A faint, almost imperceptible sigh escapes him, not of regret, but of a minor burden accepted. He lifts his hand, not pointing, but simply gesturing with two fingers towards the vast curtained bed. The gesture is languid, dismissive, an order delivered without words, as final as a tombstone being laid. The scent of the roses swells, thick and sweet, clashing violently with the underlying stench of cold ash and old fear. It coats her tongue, making her want to gag. The fire crackles, a sound suddenly mocking. Legs buckling like a gutted deer. The memory of her own earlier thought floods back. She locks her knees. For the barley field. She forces air into her lungs, a ragged, silent gasp. One step, then another. The plush rug swallows her footfalls, making her feel insubstantial, a ghost walking towards her own execution. The bed looms larger with each shuffling step, its dark velvet curtains like folded wings. He doesn't watch her progress. He's already turning back to the table, picking up the goblet again. His attention drifts to the ledger. As she passes within a few feet of him, close enough to smell the faint, expensive musk beneath the wine and roses, she sees it. On the page, beneath the last entry, a fresh line awaits. And on the tip of his index finger, held just above the parchment, a single tiny smudge of gray, ash, or perhaps dirt, the dirt of the scullery floor, her dirt, waiting to be inscribed beside her name. She reaches the edge of the bed. The velvet is cold under her trembling fingertips. The silence stretches, broken only by the crackling fire and the soft scratch of a quill being dipped into an inkwell somewhere behind her. He's already begun. The sound is a hook in her gut, pulling tight. Scritch, scratch. Each stroke etches itself onto her nerves. She doesn't dare turn. Her gaze remains fixed on the cold, bruised, dark velvet of the bed curtain beneath her raw fingers. But her mind conjures the image, the sharp nib carving into the parchment. Date, time, scullery maid. Name, her name. Ilara, Brenna, hers, becoming just another line in the ledger of the Rose Chamber. A faint tremor starts deep within her core, radiating outwards. Her legs threaten to dissolve. She presses her forehead against the velvet. It smells faintly of dust and something stale beneath the overwhelming roses. Smile when he takes you. The steward's voice is a viper coiled in her ear. Cry and your father's barley field burns. She bites down hard on the inside of her cheek. The sharp, coppery tang of her own blood floods her mouth, a familiar pain, grounding and terrible. The scratching stops. A heavy silence descends, thicker than before. She can feel his presence shift behind her, a subtle change in the air pressure. He's watching her now. She can feel the weight of his gaze on the back of her neck, the curve of her spine, the trembling line of her shoulders under the thin smock. It's not desire she feels radiating from him. It's appraisal, impatience. The weary scrutiny of a man checking off a tedious chore. The crystal goblet clinks softly as he sets it down again, not on the table, somewhere closer. Then, footsteps. Slow, deliberate. The soft crush of boot soles on the thick rug, coming nearer. He stops, not touching her, just there. The expensive musk, the wine, the cloying roses, they intensify, wrapping around her like a shroud. His breath stirs the loose hairs at her nape. Cold air, She flinches, a tiny, involuntary spasm. She instantly curses. A low sound escapes him, not a chuckle, more like a sigh of mild exasperation. His voice is dry, quiet, devoid of inflection. Not a command roared, but an expectation stated. As immutable as stone, it's the first time he's spoken directly to her. The sound is worse than silence. Every muscle screams to disobey, to keep her face pressed into the velvet, to become part of the curtain, the stone, the dust. But the image of flames licking dry barley stalks under a dawn sky flares behind her eyelids. For Da, for home. Slowly, mechanically, like a rusted hinge forced open, she turns. He stands less than an arm's length away. Firelight glints dully off the fine embroidery on his robe, catches the hollows beneath his cheekbones. His eyes, dark and depthless, hold hers. There's no anger there, no cruelty she can name, just emptiness. A vast, chilling indifference. He looks through her skin past her fear, seeing only the function she serves. His gaze drifts down, lingering for a moment on the smear of grime on her cheek, the raw, split knuckles clenched white at her sides. His lip doesn't curl this time, he simply notes them. Imperfections on the inventory. He lifts one hand, not fast, not slow. A deliberate, inevitable movement. His fingers, cool and smooth, brush against the rough neckline of her smock. The touch isn't sensual. It's the touch of a man testing the quality of coarse fabric, assessing its readiness to be removed. Her breath stops. Her vision tunnels. The fire crackles. The roses watch with their waxy, unblinking faces. The ledger lies open on the table behind him, the fresh ink on the newest line still glistening wetly in the firelight. Scritch, scratch. The sound echoes in her skull. His fingers find the simple knot at the side of her smock. They pause. He doesn't look at her face anymore. He looks at the knot, waiting. His gaze drifts down, lingering for a moment on the smear of grime on her cheek, the raw, split knuckles clenched white at her sides. His lip doesn't curl this time. He simply notes them. Imperfections on the inventory. He lifts one hand, not fast, not slow. A deliberate, inevitable movement. His fingers, cool and smooth, brush against the rough neckline of her smock. The touch isn't sensual. It's the touch of a man testing the quality of coarse fabric, assessing its readiness to be removed. Her breath stops. Her vision tunnels. The fire crackles. The roses watch with their waxy, unblinking faces. The ledger lies open on the table behind him, the fresh ink on the newest line still glistening wetly in the firelight. Scritch, scratch. The sound echoes in her skull. His fingers find the simple knot at the side of her smock. They pause. He doesn't look at her face anymore. He looks at the knot, waiting. The knot. Just a twist of coarse thread, a thing she's tied 1,000 times before dawn, fingers numb with cold. Now, it's a mountain, an executioner's block. His stillness is worse than a grab. It's a void demanding to be filled by her obedience. Her hands, they rise. Not her hands anymore. Dead things, puppet limbs jerked by the steward's whisper still coiled around her spine. Smile. Smile or the barley burns. Her lips stretch again, a rictus cracking dry skin. It feels like tearing cloth. Her fingers find the knot. They're shaking so badly the rough thread bites into the raw splits on her knuckles. A fresh bead of blood wells, dark against the gray linen. She doesn't feel the sting. All feeling is drowned in the roaring silence, the weight of his gaze fixed on her fumbling digits. Imperfections. One tug. The knot resists, tightened by hours of labor, by fierce sweat. A tiny choked sound escapes her, less a whimper, more the gasp of a drowning woman breaking surface for half a second. His breath, cool and wine-scented, brushes her temple. He doesn't move, doesn't help, doesn't reprimand. He just watches the struggle, an observer to the dismantling. Scritch, scratch. The phantom quill carves into her mind. Name, date, condition compliant. She hooks a ragged thumbnail under the stubborn loop, pulls. The thread rasps, loud as a scream in the perfumed tomb. The knot yields, slackens. The neckline of her smock gapes open a fraction, revealing the hollow at the base of her throat, pulsing wildly. A strip of skin, pale as winter moonlight against the ingrained grime of her neck, vulnerable. His gaze doesn't lift to her face. It drops, traces that exposed sliver of skin. Not with hunger, but with a detached clinical interest. Like a butcher noting the grain of meat. His own hand remains at his side, fingers relaxed. He's making her do it. All of it. The unraveling is hers, the shame is hers to enact. Another trembling pull. The knot unravels completely. The rough cord slithers free, coiling limply against her hip. The simple smock, held only by the ragged belt at her waist now, hangs loose. The firelight finds the sharp angles of her collarbones, the thinness of her shoulders under the coarse fabric. She feels utterly flayed, not naked yet, but unmade. The ledger's fresh ink seems to pulse at the edge of her vision. He doesn't touch her, doesn't command the next step. He simply shifts his gaze slowly, deliberately, from the undone knot to the frayed rope belt cinching her waist. The silent command hangs thicker than the rose stench. Continue. Her breath comes in shallow, ragged hitches that burn her lungs. Tears, hot and furious, press against the backs of her eyes, blurring the monstrous roses, the indifferent fire, the king's impassive face. She swallows them down, tasting blood and salt and the iron tang of utter despair. For the field. Her fingers, slick with cold sweat now as well as blood, fumble towards the knotted rope at her waist. Each fiber feels like a live wire. The weight of the smock, suddenly unsupported, shifts against her thin shift beneath. It feels like waiting for a shove into an abyss. Fade on her bloodied fingers hovering over the waist knot. His eyes fixed on her trembling hands. The undone neckline gaping like a wound. The fire casting long, accusing shadows that look like bars on the velvet walls. The rope is damp with her terror. Her knuckles scream as her broken skin catches on the rough hemp. Pull, her mind shrieks, but her fingers are clumsy, disobedient things. They slip. The knot remains, a stubborn fist clenched against her fate. A whimper escapes, thin and broken, swallowed instantly by the thick, rose-choked air. She clamps her jaw shut, teeth grinding. Silence. Silence or the fire comes. His sigh is barely audible, a puff of air near her ear. Not anger, not even impatience, just weariness. The sound of a man delayed by faulty equipment. It scalds her worse than a slap. Her vision blurs again, tears welling despite her iron will, turning the monstrous roses into bleeding smears of red wax. For the field. She digs a ragged thumbnail deep into the knot's core, ignoring the fresh stab of pain in her split knuckle. She wrenches. The coarse fibers bite back, then finally yield with a frayed, tearing sound. The rope belt slithers free, falling soundlessly to the plush rug like a dead snake. The smock hangs open. For a suspended, heart-stopping second, it clings by habit and gravity alone to the thin, sweat-damp shift beneath. The firelight licks the sharp angles of her shoulders, the vulnerable dip of her spine visible through the thin fabric. She feels the cool air of the chamber touch her skin through the shift. A shocking intimacy. She is unmade before him, laid bare, not in desire, but in inventory. Then the weight shifts. The coarse gray linen of the smock slides, slowly at first, catching on the rough weave of her shift, then gathering momentum. It slumps down her arms, over her trembling hips, and pools around her ankles on the rug. A small gray island at her bare feet. The rough hem brushes her toes. She stands clad only in the thin, worn shift, threadbare, patched in places, the outline of her body starkly visible against the firelight behind her. The fabric clings, damp with cold sweat, to every trembling curve and jutting bone. Her raw, bloodied knuckles hang uselessly at her sides. The silence is absolute. Even the fire seems to hold its breath. The king doesn't move. His gaze is no longer on her hands. It travels, slow and appraising, over the thin shift plastered to her skin, over the sharp jut of her hip bone, the two prominent ribs, the frantic pulse hammering at the base of her throat. It's the gaze of a man assessing livestock, checking for defects, confirming the entry in his ledger. Condition: acceptable. He takes a single step forward, not invading her space entirely, but closing the distance enough that his shadow falls over her, swallowing the small patch of rug where her smock lies. The scent of him, wine, cold perfume, power, envelops her, thick as smoke. She can see the fine weave of his dark robe, the glint of a heavy signet ring on his finger. She stares fixedly at the discarded crown on the table beyond him, its dull gold mocking her. His hand lifts again, not towards the shift, not yet. He reaches out, those cool, smooth fingers brushing not her skin, but the rough, damp fabric of her shift where it clings to her shoulder. He pinches a fold of it between thumb and forefinger, testing the weight, the quality. A dismissive flicker passes over his features. Coarse, cheap. The unspoken judgment hangs in the air. Then his fingers trail down, slowly, along the seam of the shift, following the line of her collarbone. The touch is light, almost impersonal, yet it burns like acid. Her breath hitches, a ragged, trapped sound. Every muscle in her body locks rigid, screaming to recoil, to flee, to fight. But the image of fire consuming golden barley stalks under a dawn sky holds her frozen. Tears, hot and silent, finally spill over, tracing clean paths through the grime on her cheeks. His hand stops, rests lightly, possessively on the curve where her shoulder meets her neck. His thumb brushes the frantic pulse point there, feeling the wild, trapped bird flutter beneath her skin. His expression doesn't change. The ledger awaits. The bed looms. He exerts the faintest pressure, not pulling, not forcing, just guiding, turning her slowly, inexorably towards the vast, shadowed maw of the curtained bed. Her body obeys the pressure, a puppet on strings of terror, turning stiffly on bare feet that feel fused to the rug. Each inch rotated towards the bed is a mile deeper into nightmare. The velvet curtains loom closer, their deep crimson now seeming less like luxury and more like congealed blood in the fire's guttering light. The monstrous roses in their vases seem to lean in, their waxy petals gleaming like watchful eyes, their sickly sweet perfume thickening the air until it's hard to draw breath. She feels the shift sticking to her back, damp with cold sweat, a pathetic, transparent shield against the inevitable. His hand remains on her shoulder, that point of contact burning with icy finality. His thumb still rests against the frantic pulse in her neck, a constant, terrible reminder of the life fluttering beneath her skin, a life he holds as carelessly as the goblet he'd set down. He doesn't hurry. His steps as he guides her the final few feet are measured, almost ceremonial. The soft crush of his boots on the rug is the only sound besides the crackling mockery of the fire and the deafening roar of blood in her own ears. The ledger, she knows, lies open behind them, the ink drying on her name. They stop before the yawning darkness between the parted curtains. The bed within is a vast, shadowed landscape, the sheets unnervingly white and crisp in the dim light bleeding from the hearth. It smells faintly of lavender and starch, a cruel parody of cleanliness laid over the chamber's underlying stench of dread and decay. His shadow, cast long and monstrous by the fire, engulfs her completely, merging with the deeper shadows of the bed. She feels infinitesimally small, a scrap of refuse about to be discarded. His hand lifts from her shoulder. The absence of that cold pressure is almost worse. It leaves her unmoored, trembling violently in the void. She braces for the shove, the grab, the tearing of the thin shift, but it doesn't come. Instead, he simply stands beside her, looking not at her but at the bed, surveying the territory. The silence stretches, agonizing, pregnant with unspoken command. Get in. The words hang in the perfumed air, heavier than stone. Her legs refuse. They are columns of water, trembling on the brink of collapse. Move, move, or the field burns. The steward's whisper is a lash. She forces one leaden foot forward, then the other, stepping onto the cold wooden step stool placed beside the impossibly high bed. The rough grain bites into her bare soul. Each movement is agony, a betrayal of her own flesh. She grips the edge of the mattress, the fabric cool and slick beneath her raw, bleeding knuckles. The pain is a distant, irrelevant thing. She hauls herself up, the thin shift riding up her thighs, offering a horrifying glimpse of pale, goose-fleshed skin. The mattress yields softly, treacherously beneath her slight weight. She scrambles backwards, crab-like, until her spine hits the carved wooden headboard, cold and unyielding through the shift. She draws her knees up to her chest, wrapping her arms around them, trying to make herself a smaller target, a harder knot to unravel. The pose is instinctive, ancient, a child bracing for a blow. He watches her retreat. A flicker of something, impatience, amusement, might cross his impassive face, but it's gone too quickly to decipher in the gloom. He doesn't follow her onto the bed immediately. He turns, slowly, deliberately, and walks back towards the table. The sound of his footsteps is measured, echoing the dread rhythm of her heart. He picks up the crystal goblet, swirls the dark wine once, watching the firelight catch the viscous liquid. He takes a long, slow sip, his gaze fixed not on her, but on the open ledger. He reads her name, the date, perhaps other notations, confirming the transaction. The crystal catches the light as he sets the goblet down with a soft, definitive clink. The sound is a period at the end of a sentence. Her sentence. Then, he turns back towards the bed. He doesn't walk with urgency, but with the weary inevitability of a man performing a distasteful but necessary duty. He reaches the edge of the bed and pauses, looking down at her huddled form against the headboard. His shadow falls over her again, immense and suffocating. The firelight outlines his silhouette, glinting dully on the rich fabric of his robe, the heavy signet ring. He begins to untie the sash of his own robe, his movements economical, practiced. There's no ceremony, no seduction. It's the preparation for work. The fine silk whisper of the sash sliding free is obscenely loud. He shrugs the heavy robe from his shoulders. It pools at his feet on the rug, a dark puddle of discarded power next to her own pathetic gray smock. Beneath, he wears only loose linen trousers. He places one knee on the edge of the high bed, the frame groaning softly under his weight. The mattress dips significantly. He looms over her, blocking the firelight, plunging her into deeper shadow. His scent, musk, wine, cold stone, envelops her completely. His eyes, finally meeting hers in the near darkness, hold no fire, no passion, only the chilling absolute certainty of possession. The ledger is closed. The accounting is done. Now comes the collection. The space between them vanishes. His weight settles onto the mattress, a landslide engulfing her fragile island. The carved headboard digs into her spine, the only solid thing in a world tilting wildly. His shadow swallows the meager firelight, plunging her into a darkness that smells only of him, cold stone, old wine, and the cloying decay beneath the roses. His breath, steady and unnervingly calm, washes over her face. He doesn't grab, not yet. His hand, the one that signed the ledger, poured the wine, tapped the parchment, rises slowly in the gloom. It hovers near her cheek, not touching, tracing the air where her tear tracks cut paths through the grime. She flinches violently, a trapped bird beating against invisible bars. A low sound rumbles in his chest, not quite a growl, more like stones grinding together. Stillness. The unspoken command vibrates in the air. Her breath hitches, catching like broken glass in her throat. She forces her muscles rigid, locking the scream behind her teeth. Smile, smile, or the barley burns. The ghastly rictus stretches her lips, cracking them anew. She tastes blood again, metallic and sharp, mixing with the salt of her tears. He watches the grotesque expression, his eyes dark pits reflecting nothing. His fingertips finally make contact. Not on her face, but on her collarbone, exposed by the shift's neckline. The touch is light, exploratory, like a scholar examining a curious artifact. His skin is cool, smooth, utterly alien against her feverish, grimy flesh. He traces the sharp ridge of bone, down towards the hollow at her throat where her pulse hammers against her skin like a frantic prisoner. She squeezes her eyes shut. Not here, not here. She tries to flee inward, to the sun-warmed scent of Da's barley field, the rhythmic scrape of the scrubbing brush, the simple ache of tired muscles, anything but this cold hand mapping her terror. But the phantom scritch-scratch of the quill invades her sanctuary. Name, date, condition, compliant. His hand slides lower over the thin, worn fabric of her shift, covering the frantic drumming of her heart. He doesn't press, merely rests his palm there, feeling the wild, trapped rhythm beneath. A flicker of something, curiosity, contempt, might have crossed his face, but in the deep shadows, it's impossible to tell. His thumb begins a slow, rhythmic stroke over the fabric, directly above her heart. It's not a caress, it's measurement, taking her pulse, taking her measure. His other hand moves, not towards her but to the neckline of her shift. His fingers find the frayed edge. They don't tug. They pinch the thin fabric, testing its tensile strength. She feels the slight pull against her skin, the threat of rending. A choked sob tries to escape. She bites down on her tongue until she tastes fresh copper. Silence. Silence or the fire comes. He releases the fabric. His hand drifts lower, skimming over her ribs, counting them through the shift like the bars of a cage. His touch is impersonal, detached. He maps the sharp angles of her hip bone, the dip of her waist. It's an inventory, confirming the leanness noted in the ledger. Acceptable, barely. His fingers pause on the thin material bunched over her drawn-up knees. With a sigh that seems to carry the weight of centuries of entitlement, he exerts gentle, inexorable pressure on her knees, not forcing them down, but persuading them. A silent argument rages within her. the instinct to curl tighter, smaller, versus the image of flames consuming golden stalks under a gray dawn sky. For Da, her muscles scream as she slowly, agonizingly uncurls her legs, letting them slide flat on the cold sheet. The shift rides up her thighs. The cool air touches bare skin, making her flinch anew. His shadowed gaze follows the movement, lingering on the exposed pale flesh. There's no heat in his look, only a cold assessment. He places his hand flat on her thigh, just above the hem of the shift. His palm is heavy, possessive. It pins her in place more effectively than chains. He leans closer. His face is inches from hers now, a dark shape blocking out the world. She can see the fine lines around his eyes, the pores in his skin. His breath, smelling of tannin and something vaguely sour, mingles with her own panicked gasps. He studies her face, the stretched smile, the tear-streaked grime, the wide, unseeing eyes. It feels like being dissected while still alive. His head dips lower, not towards her mouth, but towards her neck. His nose brushes the skin just below her ear. He inhales slowly, deeply, not the scent of her hair or skin, but the scent of her fear. The sweat, the blood, the ingrained lie and grime of the scullery. His exhale is a soft puff against her damp skin. Condition, acceptable. His lips touch the frantic pulse point on her neck. It's not a kiss, it's a brand. Cold, dry pressure. She jerks as if scalded, a strangled cry escaping despite her iron control. His hand on her thigh tightens instantly, fingers digging into her flesh. A warning. His mouth remains pressed to her pulse, feeling the terrified flutter against his lips. He pulls back slightly, just enough to look at her again. Her cry hangs in the air, a single broken note. His expression hasn't changed, yet the stillness radiating from him is suddenly dangerous, volcanic. Cry and your father's barley field burns at dawn. The steward's whisper is a lash of ice down her spine. She locks her jaw, biting down so hard stars burst behind her eyelids. He seems to accept her renewed silence. His hand moves from her thigh, sliding upwards beneath the bunched hem of her shift. The calloused pads of his fingers scrape against the sensitive skin of her inner thigh. It's not gentle, it's purposeful, claiming. She feels the roughness against her vulnerability, a violation more profound than any pain. His other hand finally moves to the neckline of her shift. His fingers hook into the fabric. He doesn't tear, but pulls, slowly, steadily. The worn linen stretches, protesting. The seam at her shoulder groans. She feels the cool air rush over newly exposed skin, her shoulder, the curve of her breast. She stares fixedly at the canopy above, a dark void swallowing her. He pauses, the shift pulled half down, exposing her shoulder and the upper swell of her breast. His gaze travels over the revealed skin, pale and marked with faint bruises from labor. He runs a fingertip over a bluish mark near her collarbone. A souvenir from hauling water, perhaps. He makes a soft, non-committal sound in his throat. Imperfection noted. His hand beneath the shift continues its ascent, skimming higher. She feels his knuckles brush against the most intimate part of her. A final, desperate whimper escapes her, muffled against the back of her own hand clamped over her mouth. He ignores it. His touch isn't seeking pleasure. It's establishing dominion. Possession confirmed. The ledger entry complete. He shifts his weight fully over her, his body pressing her down into the yielding mattress. The air is driven from her lungs. The scent of roses, his skin, her fear, becomes a suffocating blanket. He braces himself on one forearm beside her head. His other hand remains beneath the shift, a cold, inescapable presence. He looks down at her, his face impassive in the gloom, a king surveying conquered territory. There's no tenderness, no preamble, no pretense of anything but the transaction. He moves. A sharp, intrusive pressure, a tearing sensation deep within, not just physical, but of her very self. The silent scream trapped in her throat finally finds its voice. A raw, ragged gasp of pure animal agony. Outside the thick walls, the indifferent stars wheeled on. Inside the rose chamber, the fire crackled over cold ashes, the waxen roses watched with blank-petaled faces, and the king collected what was, in his ledger and his world, simply owed. The petals were being plucked. This harrowing sequence concludes within the suffocating silence of the rose chamber, where the king's cold, transactional possession of the scullery maid is rendered with brutal intimacy. As he methodically enacts his entitlement, his touch clinical, his gaze devoid of humanity, her silent agony becomes a raw testament to systemic violation. The pristine ledger lies closed, its fresh ink a stark counterpoint to the girl's shattered spirit. The waxen roses bear mute witness, and the crackling fire mocks the cold ashes of her former self. This isn't passion, it's the grim fulfillment of power's darkest ledger entry, leaving only the echo of plucked petals and the chilling certainty that the cycle, like the indifferent stars outside, will continue.